Call the member for Whitsunday.
Thank you, Madam Acting Speaker. I too also want to acknowledge the work of the committee, and in particular acknowledge the chair, member for Mansfield, because I do believe she was fantastic actually on the day, and I certainly felt like I had adequate time and it was fair and reasonable. But I also want to acknowledge the work of my committee members as well. I'd like to highlight, obviously, the amendments of the Youth Justice Act of 1992 and the effect that took place on the 30th of April 2021 has not significantly decreased crime across our state when it comes to youth offenders. During estimates, it also uncovered that GPS monitoring devices obviously also have not been utilised since that legislation was reintroduced and further endorsed by this House. 4 of those suitably assessed youth, the courts made it non-conditional for them, so we've seen 0 GPS monitoring devices utilised across our state, and yet we see 92 young people who have committed more than 30 offences while out on bail, which only reinforces the opposition's call for breach of bail to be reintroduced. Not just those communities in Townsville and Far North Queensland, but now here in South East Queensland that we see communities also calling and in support of the opposition. Youth justice, we saw $7.7 million over 4 years is going to be allocated for drug and alcohol services, including a 10-bed residential facility. And while I welcome that funding and that's a support, because we do know drug and alcohol contributes greatly to the complex needs of young people, I did make it clear to the minister that the expectation would be that there are regional and rural placements made available for young people across our state. In the child safety budget, we saw 20% of the budget, almost $309.2 million, being allocated to foster and kinship. With over 12,000 children in out-of-home care, that figure is only barely going far enough. With 87% of our high-risk children being cared for by foster and kinship carers, of which 20% of children have a disability, the access to service, the bureaucracy, the challenges that I am hearing from foster carers, kinship carers, and in particular the paperwork and the paper trail and the permissions needed when they are trying to access care and support for children that need it desperately, needs to be reviewed by the department, and I urge the minister to take that up with the Director-General after engaging with foster carers in the Townsville region just recently. The increase in representation of Indigenous youth from 5.4 to 5.4 per 1,000 now requiring protective orders. We've seen an increase from 52.4 to 57.8. The minister so rightly acknowledged there is more to do, and I think for our First Nations peoples, Madam Acting Speaker, there is far more to do. Right now, this government has let them down when it comes to COVID vaccinations, and we continue to see the increased demand in complex needs for children and families across our Indigenous communities. I'd also like to highlight, and never will I ever stop saying this young child's name, Mason Jet Lee. We say it so that we remember and we ensure that that tragedy never, ever occurs again. The LNP asked questions of the minister about the recommendations which came out of that coronial inquest, where the coroner determined that the department had failed Mason, and as a result the Public Service Commission had ordered to conduct a review into the disciplinary decisions of the department, which did identify grossly inadequate misconduct. The Public Service Commission mandated that the department seek independent legal advice from Crown Law on complex disciplinary matters for the next 2 years. I will continue to ask the question of how many times the department needs to seek Crown Law advice, and the DG was able to confirm that in this case, in the last 12 months, it's been 5 matters have been sought for advice. The Department of Child Safety will be monitored by another entity when it comes to these matters, and that has demonstrated the need for us always to uphold process, to ensure transparency and to ensure that young people, our most vulnerable, are always protected. The LNP will continue to stand up in a respectful, bipartisan way for our most vulnerable in our region and in our communities, but also hold this government to account to its investment and its responsibility as guardian of these young people. Deputy Speaker.
Call the member for Nudgee.
Thank